Brother told me. You're just a failure living off luck. Mom nodded and said, Stop embarrassing us. I said okay. Last week they showed up at my door begging They were standing on my porch like strangers who'd taken a wrong turn. My brother Craig, the golden child, always so sure of himself, now looked like he hadn't slept in days. My mother, Eleanor, clutched her purse with trembling fingers, her mouth pressed into that same thin, disapproving line she used to wear when she scolded me as a boy. And I stood in the doorway of my home, with the kind of quiet that made people uncomfortable. The kind of quiet that makes them remember every cruel word they once tossed at you like breadcrumbs to a bird they hoped wouldn't fly. I didn't speak right away. I wanted them to feel it. That silence. That weight. The shift in gravity that happens when the tables turn. Craig was the first to speak. Hey, listen, I know this is awkward. Awkward? I repeated, my voice low, calm. You mean like being told I'm a failure while everyone laughs? He flinched. That felt good. Not because I wanted revenge, not really, but because I wanted him to remember everything. It's funny. They thought I'd never amount to anything. That I'd always be the little brother with big dreams and no direction. That my wins were just luck. Never effort. Never talent. Just luck. They never asked what I was doing after I walked out the door that final time. They just assumed I was drifting somewhere, waiting to crash. But I wasn't drifting. I was building. And now they were here, not because they wanted to be, but because they had nowhere else to go. I stepped aside. Come in, I said, almost gently. Let's talk. But not the kind of talk they were expecting. This wasn't forgiveness. This was the beginning of the reckoning. The living room hadn't changed since the last time Craig saw it. But everything else had. He glanced around at the hardwood floors, the curated art, the clean lines of my furniture, understated, expensive, elegant. My mother's eyes lingered on the grand piano in the corner, the same one she refused to let me touch as a kid because lessons were a waste of money. Now it was mine. Craig cleared his throat and started with the kind of fake humility you only hear when someone's desperate. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't serious. I didn't respond. I wanted him to squirm, to explain. Eleanor looked down at her lap, her voice barely a whisper. We're in a bit of a situation. I raised an eyebrow. A situation? They hesitated. So I pushed. You're going to need to be more specific than that. And that's when it started to unravel. Craig ran a tech startup, or tried to. It got attention early on, landed some seed funding, rode the hype train longer than it should have. I'd read the articles, watched from afar. He'd always been the face of it, all swagger, buzzwords, and blazers over t-shirts. But now, it's gone, he said. Investors pulled out. Product didn't launch. Legal issues. Everything crashed overnight. I leaned back and crossed my arms. And Mom? Eleanor winced. I co-signed some things for him. And, well, there were some debts I hadn't told anyone about. It all hit at once. There it was. The empire they built on ego had collapsed. And they had come to me, the burden, the black sheep, the failure, to bail them out. I stood slowly and walked toward the fireplace. Above it hung a single-framed photo, me, in front of the first business I ever opened. The one they mocked. The one Craig said would fall apart before the paint dried. They were only now seeing that I hadn't just survived. I had won. Still, I didn't smile. Not yet. There was more to say. And much more for them to hear. Craig shifted in his seat like the leather was made of nails. Mom kept wringing her hands, but neither of them dared meet my eyes now. I let the silence stretch out between us like a chasm. Let them feel how far they'd fallen. Then I asked the question I knew they feared. What exactly do you want from me? Craig glanced at Mom, like maybe she'd speak up. She didn't. Of course not. It was always someone else's job to fix the mess. We need help, he said. Alone. Something to hold us over while we figure things out. Alone? I said, tilting my head. Interesting choice of word. He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. You know, I remember being 17, standing in the garage with you. I had a backpack full of designs for a mobile app one was building. You remember what you said to me that day? His jaw tightened. You're just a failure living off luck. I quoted, my voice cool. You'll never make it. You're embarrassing us. I turned to Mom. And you nodded. You didn't even look up from your coffee. That was a long time ago. She whispered. But I remember it like it was yesterday. I said. Because you made sure I wouldn't forget. I saw something flicker in Craig's eyes, maybe guilt, maybe just the shock of someone finally standing up to him. You cut me down every time I tried to build something. I continued. You laughed when I got my first office. You said my car was rented, my success was fake. You told everyone I'd be back asking for help. You called me delusional. I stepped closer. But I never came back. Not until now. And it's funny, because here you are, sitting on my couch, asking me for help. Eleanor's voice cracked. We didn't know things would turn out this way. No, I said. You didn't. Because you never believed I had it in me. For a moment, Craig looked like he might say something. Then he just sat back, jaw clenched, too proud to apologize, too broken to argue. Good. They needed to see it. To feel the weight of every word they'd thrown at me. And they still hadn't heard the worst of it. I stood in front of them, not as the boy they once dismissed, but as the man who'd built everything they never believed he could. And still, I didn't feel angry, not the way I thought I would. What I felt was clarity. Let me tell you what happened after I left, I said, walking slowly across the room, letting my words land one by one. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment with a mattress on the floor. I worked 2 jobs. I taught myself web development at night, coded until my eyes burned. Craig looked down at the coffee table, his fingers tapping the edge. I built my first business from nothing. Took on freelance work. Saved every penny. Invested smart. And when that paid off, I doubled down. Bought real estate before the market turned. Built a portfolio. Hired the right people. I stopped by the window, hands in my pockets. I own this house outright. I own the building my company operates from. I own several companies now. Craig's lips parted slightly, like he was about to say something, then closed again. You see, I never needed your approval, I said, turning to face them. But I wanted you to see. I wanted you to know. I walked back over to the coffee table and picked up an envelope I'd prepared months ago. I handed it to Craig. He opened it slowly, a single printed spreadsheet. Every debt I knew they had. Every unpaid loan, foreclosure notice, court summons. And one more page, a list of every insult Craig had ever texted me, every email from Mom dismissing my success, every voicemail where they laughed behind my back. Where did you get this? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. I've been waiting, I said. Not for you to fail, but for you to finally understand who I've become. Eleanor looked like she might cry. So, are you going to help us or not? I smiled. Not a cruel smile. Not even smug. Just final. I am going to help, I said. But not the way you think. Their eyes lit up for a second. Then I continued. You're going to stay at the motel across from the gas station on 9th. I've already paid for 2 nights. After that, you're on your own. Craig blinked. That's it? No. That's not it, I said, walking to the door and holding it open. That's me giving you exactly what you gave me all those years ago, nothing, wrapped in silence. I nodded toward the hallway. You have 5 minutes to leave. Craig didn't move at first. He just sat there, stunned, like he was trying to figure out if I was bluffing. Mom slowly stood, her hand reaching out toward me in that instinctive way, like I was still her son, like those years of dismissal hadn't happened. Please, she whispered, you don't have to do this. We're family. I tilted my head, studying her. You remember the night I told you I got accepted into the small business incubator? The one where I pitched my first idea? She blinked, confused. You told me, stop embarrassing us in front of people. They're going to think we raised a failure. Her hand dropped to her side. I remember everything, I said. Every moment you told me to be smaller, quieter, more like Craig. And now, you want me to forget all of it? Craig finally stood, fists clenched at his sides. You don't know what it's like to watch everything fall apart. To lose everything. Oh, but I do, I said quietly. I lost my family years ago. The difference is, I rebuilt myself. They walked out slowly. Not another word from either of them. No apology. No fight. Just silence. Eleanor paused once at the door, looked back like she wanted to say something, but then she followed Craig down the steps, her shoulders hunched like the weight of their choices had finally landed. I closed the door. Not with a slam. Not with fury. Just a soft click. The kind that says, this chapter is over. I leaned against the door and exhaled, a long, steady breath I felt like I'd been holding for 20 years. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like peace. The house felt still after they left, like it had exhaled too. I stood in the foyer for a while, just listening to the silence. Not the kind of silence I grew up with, the cold, heavy kind where no one said, I'm proud of you. Or, are you okay? This was different. It was clean. It was earned. I walked back to the living room, where the envelope Craig had dropped still sat on the coffee table. I picked it up, ran my fingers over the edge. The man I used to be would have second-guessed himself. He would have replayed every moment, wondered if he'd been too harsh, worried about what they'd say to others. But that man didn't live here anymore. I tossed the envelope in the fireplace, lit a match, and watched the flames eat every line, every insult, every debt that no longer belonged to me. It was strange, how easy it was to burn the past once you stopped worshipping it. Later that evening, I sat by the window with a glass of bourbon, staring out at the driveway where their car had been parked. I thought back to all the times I used to imagine this moment, the fantasy of them needing me, the poetic justice, the satisfying refusal. But now that it had happened, it didn't feel like a fantasy at all. It felt real. Grounded. Even a little sad. Because the truth is, I didn't want them to fail. I just wanted them to see me. But now I realized, they never truly would. And somehow, that no longer felt like a tragedy. It just felt like freedom. 3 days after they left, I got a knock on the door. Not the desperate kind. Not the angry kind. Just soft. I opened it to find a face I hadn't expected, Uncle Frank. He was my dad's younger brother. A quiet man, always a bit of a shadow during family gatherings. He never took sides. Never said much. But when my dad passed, and Craig started puffing out his chest, and Mom started looking through me like I wasn't even in the room, Uncle Frank was the only one who ever pulled me aside and said, You're not crazy. Just ahead of your time. He stood there now in a weathered denim jacket, holding a small paper bag. Brought you the lemon muffins you liked as a kid, he said, handing it to me. Figured you could use something sweet after all that bitterness. I stepped aside. Come in. He walked in slowly, looked around the place, let out a low whistle. You really built something here. Yeah, I said. Took a while. He sat down at the kitchen counter, opened the muffins. Your mom called me. Said you kicked them to the curb like garbage. That true? I raised an eyebrow. Depends on whether you believe in karma. Uncle Frank chuckled. I told her, garbage doesn't usually show up with receipts. I laughed, a real one. First in a while. He looked at me. You want to know the difference between you and Craig? I didn't answer. You took pain and planted it. Let it grow into something useful. Craig? He polished it, framed it, and tried to pass it off as pride. We sat in silence for a while after that. Just eating muffins, letting the years settle. Before he left, he said something I hadn't heard from anyone in my family in decades. I'm proud of you. And I believed him. That night, after Uncle Frank left, I found myself going through old boxes in the attic, the ones I hadn't touched in years. They were full of things I used to keep hidden. Sketches of early app designs. Receipts from gigs I'd done for next to nothing. Handwritten notes to myself, little mantras like keep going. No one has to believe in you but you. One of them hit me hard. It was on the back of an old grocery list. Don't prove them wrong. Just prove yourself right. I remember writing that after Craig laughed at my idea to create custom CRM software for local shops. You build software? He'd said. You barely passed algebra. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that I'd spent months teaching myself logic, SQL, Python, then Ruby, then front-end frameworks. Alone. In silence. With nothing but stubbornness and a coffee machine. And when my first client paid me $1,500 for a setup I built from scratch, I didn't call Craig. I didn't tell Mom. I just smiled to myself, turned off the lights, and got back to work. Now, years later, Forbes had just named my company one of the top 30 underrated tech firms to watch. A venture fund I once pitched to, and was laughed out of the room, had just emailed me with an exploratory interest in investing. And the last app one released? Over 3 million downloads. But none of that made me feel as victorious as the moment I said no to my own family when they expected me to crawl back. I never wanted to hurt them. I wanted them to see me. To stop measuring my worth by the shine of my brother's achievements, or by how well I stayed in my place. Instead, I made my own. You know what's strange? Once people realize you've made it, they all want to rewrite the past. That week, I started getting messages. My aunt, who once told me I should work on being more realistic, sent me a video of herself showing off my company's website at a dinner party. A cousin I hadn't heard from since high school tagged me in a post, calling me an inspiration. Even Mom, the same woman who once refused to hang my diploma on the wall, sent a long email filled with the kind of praise I'd only ever heard her give Craig. You've always been talented, she wrote. I just didn't understand your path back then. No apology. Just revision. But I didn't need their validation anymore. So I replied simply, I understood it. That's all that mattered. And then I closed my laptop. There's something freeing about not needing the approval you once ached for. Like dropping a weight you didn't realize you were still carrying. I wasn't angry. I was done. It was about 2 weeks after I turned them away when I got the call. Private number. I usually let those go, but something made me answer. Hello? There was a pause. Then her voice. Hi. It's your mother. I sat down, slow, cautious. I wasn't sure if you'd answer, she said. Her tone was softer than I remembered, not maternal, just worn out. Like someone trying to remember how to be human after years of pretending not to be one. I've been thinking, she continued, about what you said. About the things I said. I just wanted you to know that I didn't mean to hurt you. Not I'm sorry. Not I was wrong. Just, I didn't mean to. I waited a beat, then said, That's the thing, Mom. You didn't mean to love me either. It just never crossed your mind. Silence. You could almost hear her blinking on the other end. That's not fair, she whispered. No, what wasn't fair, I said, was being told to stop embarrassing the family when all I did was try. What wasn't fair was watching Craig fail upward while I got told to keep my head down. What wasn't fair was needing you, just once, and being met with silence or worse, laughter. Another pause. I didn't know how to handle you, she admitted, and for a moment there was something fragile in her voice. You were always different. You didn't do things the way Craig did. I didn't understand it. You didn't need to understand it, I said. You just needed to believe it mattered. That I mattered. She sighed, long, tired, and somehow older than she was. I suppose it's too late now. I thought about that. Then said, No. It's not too late to learn. But it is too late to act like none of it happened. She didn't argue. I almost respected that. Before we hung up, she asked, Do you hate me? I answered honestly, No. I just don't need you anymore. And then I let her go, the same way they let me go years ago, with no promise of return. That night, I sat on the back patio under string lights, a glass of red wine in one hand, my dog curled up by my feet. The wind had that late summer softness, the kind that made the world feel forgiving even if people weren't. For the first time in years, I wasn't angry. Not even a little. I was free. Not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I'd stopped waiting for justice. I had written my own ending. And it didn't need a dramatic twist. It just needed peace. I used to think the best revenge was success. That if I just worked hard enough, made enough, proved enough people wrong, then one day I'd show up in a better car, with a better life, and silence everyone who ever doubted me. But sitting on that patio, with the world quiet and the stars just beginning to flicker above the trees, I realized something. Silence isn't revenge. Silence is healing. And healing doesn't come from making them feel what they made you feel. It comes from knowing you don't need to make them feel anything at all. When I was a teenager, I used to lie in bed and wonder if something was wrong with me. Why didn't my family root for me the way they did for Craig? Why was everything I loved, art, coding, music, business ideas, always treated like a hobby or an inconvenience? Why did every dinner conversation feel like a battle I didn't ask to be drafted into? They made me doubt myself. Not just a little. Deeply. And when you grow up thinking your worth depends on whether someone else gets it, you spend years trying to shrink yourself into something easier to digest. I did that. I tried to be who they wanted. I went to community college instead of launching my startup. I took the warehouse job instead of moving to Austin with my roommate and his wild plan to join a new tech accelerator. I shrank. For them. For peace. For approval. But peace doesn't come from being small. Peace comes from being real, even if it costs you the people you thought would love you no matter what. The day I walked out of that house for the last time, I wasn't just walking away from their words. I was walking away from the version of myself they had written for me. And I've been rewriting ever since. I didn't become successful to prove them wrong. I became successful because I finally stopped trying to prove anything at all. I just started doing the work. Late nights. Early mornings. Rejections. Small wins. No one clapped. No one cheered. No one posted a picture of me grinding away in an empty apartment. But I did it anyway. That's what people don't talk about, the middle. The part where no one believes in you yet, and you have to believe enough for everyone. The part where your bank account is almost empty, but your mind is full of ideas. The part where you have to take a breath, tighten your laces, and keep going even when no one sees you. I lived in that middle for years. And now? Now I have employees who send me emails saying, "Thank you for giving me a chance." I have clients who say, "No one ever understood our vision like you do." I have a life where I get to give, not because I owe, but because I want to. But I choose who receives that part of me. And that's what I want anyone listening to understand. You don't owe your doubters a comeback. You don't owe your pain a performance. You owe yourself one thing. A life that reflects what you always knew you were capable of. There's nothing sweeter than walking through your front door, looking around, and knowing, I built this. Not for applause. Not for payback. But for peace. So, if you're in the middle right now, if your family thinks your dream is silly, if your friends only see what you haven't done yet, if your voice trembles every time you talk about what you want because someone made you feel like it was too big, let me say this. Keep going. Keep building in silence. Keep showing up, even when no one's watching. Because one day, they'll come knocking. And when they do, you'll get to choose. You won't need revenge. You'll have something far more powerful. A life they can't take credit for. And when you close that door, gently, quietly, finally, you'll realize something. You were never a failure living off luck. You were the storm they didn't see coming.